Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. I'm not gay. This video is about Deuteronomy chapter 17. And what's key in it is that people are supposed to stone idolaters to death. God wants them to purge the evil from among them. Now, do we see that going on in Israel? No. So if it was a kingdom set up in the traditions of the Old Testament, okay, none of them would be alive right now because they're all idolaters, and some of them are very obviously idolatrous, right? You have some people who are self-proclaimed homosexuals. You have people who are pagans. People who are Satanists. People who act like witches as they walk down the street. Okay, the very occult symbols that they wear, right? Their hats, their clothing are symbols of Satanism in their own religion. Okay, if you do your research, what did Baalists do? What did the followers of the pagan deities in the area do? You see that they're doing that while claiming to be Orthodox Jews. Now, it also says that they're supposed to appoint judges, and, when the cases are too difficult to judge, right, they're supposed to go to the Levites. And if anyone shows contempt for a Levite, they're to be killed, and that would avoid people, that would prevent people from wanting to be contemptuous in the future. How much more when people insult me and show contempt for my position? So we see America is an idolatrous nation where they're commanding people to show contempt for my position. The governing class, white Jew, LGBT heavy, token minorities, they are idolaters. So when people were killed in the Old Testament, in the story, their flesh would die and then they would go to hell. Okay? And that was considered fair. They weren't allowed to continue to keep living out of mercy since they're going to hell anyway. So when a nation refuses to do that, they're going to suffer more. Now, some of you, when you read the New Testament, you constantly forget to think of things in terms of governance. So when they say, hey, you should turn the other cheek, who, what, when, where, how, why? If someone's raping your kid, should you do nothing about it? No. If someone's about to kill you, should you do nothing about it? No. If someone's burning down a church, should you do, well, your churches are satanic centers anyway, but you get what I'm saying. But when you're governing, not only do you not turn the other cheek for no reason, you're supposed to punish them with the laws of God. For example, if I was the president and this was a theocracy, or if I was the openly acknowledged king and this was a theocracy, I would have people killed for insulting God and I would have people killed for witchcraft. And they would be stoned in a way that's consistent with the Old Testament for LGBT activity. Now, this isn't a conclusion that I came to right away. After they decided to persecute me, I decided that there's no room for tolerance for LGBT activity. Once they crossed that line, I was satisfied that in a theocracy, they shouldn't be allowed to have some kind of region and to be screened out or something, that they should be executed because their spirit is so toxic that it doesn't hesitate to persecute Christ. There's no tolerance for sin. Now, keep in mind, I almost certainly would come to the conclusion that I'd ban it anyway. But what makes it very clear is that they're dumb enough to persecute me, harass me, change my voice, try to make it so I look gay. I have no tolerance for that. And I've been meaning to say this. If I ever establish a church here, LGBT people will not be allowed in it. Okay? Period. They will have to have changed themselves for years before they could even enter the church. And if they enter the church, regardless of the law, they should be beat down immediately, even killed, because they've offended God and I so much. There is no excuse for that. None. Okay, so it goes on to say that God must choose the king, not a bunch of rabbis who worship the devil. Okay, God, the throne is established in righteousness. So Deuteronomy 17 is consistent with Proverbs 16, verses 10 through 12. And Proverbs 17:2, that a prudent servant will rule over a disgraceful son and share the inheritance as one of the family. So the real children of Abraham, as we see in the New Testament, are those who do God's work. The real Jews who are chosen are those people, Jew or Gentile, who do God's work. We say in Galatians 3:28, that argument is sound. This is something that rabbis themselves, that they should have come to. This is something that even if you're a Jew, you should understand already. You shouldn't need the New Testament to understand that. Okay, those who are doing the work of God are set above other people. We see that when, they're told to surrender to the Babylonians. We see that when they're taken captive by the Egyptians. When Joseph accepts being second in command under Pharaoh, we see that God determines who's in charge, not whether or not you're a Jew. So when it says that they must be an Israelite, they're talking about, spiritually speaking, they must be somebody who's chosen by the God of Israel in the story, which isn't Yahweh or El. It's the one true God, not a mere moon deity or a Canaanite deity or some kind of Egyptian second-rate deity, but the one true God, all good, all-knowing, all-powerful. That's how you know who God is. God is all good, all-knowing, all-powerful, and it's the creator God, not some God of psychology. It also says that the king shouldn't take too many wives, something that I wouldn't do. Okay? It has to do with discipline, right? It says the person's heart goes astray. It has to do with the martial art principles. If you're really this divine martial artist who deserves to be king, you're not going to have 100 wives. This is why Solomon was wrong. All these Masons and their idolatry who want to build Solomon's temple are just some kind of womanizing punks, just some kind of idiots. Okay? Solomon was not right with God, and his heart went astray, not just because he married pagans and took on their ways, but because he had a lot of wives. He had like 1,000 wives and concubines. It's a complete disgrace. So that is a very sickening and disgusting thing to do. I don't respect it at all. Now, it also mentions that the king shouldn't think that he's any better than his fellow Israelites. Now, let's stop there for a second here. What does this mean? We see in the New Testament where Christ is a character in the story says, the one who's from above is above all. We see that John the Baptist says that Christ is greater than he is. So what does it mean exactly? Right? Why would the New Testament be wrong about that? It's not. And the Old Testament be right? Well, it has to do with how you interpret what is said. You got a lot of airheads out there. I see this guy, Johnny Chang. He says that, that God directs those who have faith in him and that they're magically going to heaven is basically his argument. Okay? That's stupid, right? These are the same types of people who say that the devil can lead you astray. So how do they know if God is leading them? This is just like he doesn't know. He's basically, New World Order shell. Okay? He's very popular. If you're very popular, I'm going to speak on you. Pretty straightforward. Fair enough to everybody? Okay. Now, obviously, I don't need anyone's permission. I'm Christ. So he's wrong because, say, the chick from Clueless, right? The movie's called Clueless. She's clueless, thinks she's following God, she's following the devil, or her brain's hacked by the state. Even if you don't think the state is hacking people's brains because you're an idiot, you know that they have the technology to be able to do so. Or you're a bigger idiot or something, right? Pretty straightforward. So how do you know it's not it's not the devil through the state or the devil through nature or whatever? How do you know it's not psychologists who planted things in your environment, right? Social media, okay, your neighborhood, and how it's social engineered in schools and your workplace and so on and so forth. How do you know that it's not something else guiding you? Well, that goes back to the martial art principles. That's why it's a martial art order, not just any scatterbrained white chick from the valley, any token minority chick, any thug with no higher cause, okay? That's how we know who's who, whether they're in the Royal African Falcon martial art order, right? How do we know it's not, a Buddhist order? Because they're not even monotheistic. How do we know it's not a Japanese order, right? Well, first of all, if they're not centered in Africa where people came from, how could that be the order? Okay? If they're using symbols that make you think of something else, then they're doing something else. And then my top martial arts challenge overkills it. Pretty straightforward.